A guten Erev Shabbos. There is so much going on this week, it's hard to know what to prioritize. So here are the headlines, and you can sort them out and think about them in any order that you like. Ran Gvili came home this week. Ran was a sergeant first class in an anti-terror unit of the Israeli police, and on October 7th, 2023, he was home on a medical leave. But when he heard about what was unfolding that awful day, he told his father he was not going to leave his friends to fight by themselves without him. Ran was killed in the line of duty that day, protecting the residents of Kibbutz Alumim, and there will be a community in that area built and named Rananim in honor of this defender of our people. Ran's body was taken by the terrorists, and he was the last person whose remains were still being held in Gaza. On Monday, his body was found and identified, and Wednesday he was brought home and laid to rest by his parents, by his sister, and a grateful nation. This brings to an end the dark chapter in our history, the saga of the hostages, alive and not, who were held in Gaza, and hopefully some healing can begin. The blaming and shaming is all well underway, but hopefully some bit of closure has taken place on this part of Israeli and Jewish history, and we can begin to move on. The section of halakha, of Jewish law, that deals with death and dying and burial and mourning is sometimes referred to as inyanei smachot, simchas, happy occasions. It's a euphemism. We don't like to say sad things or bad things, so we say the opposite. There's a number of standout examples of this in rabbinic literature. A minor tractate, which is officially named Avel Rabbati, the Great Collection of Mourning, is usually referred to as Masechet Smachot, the tractate on rejoicing. And as always, the meaning goes deeper. Of course, smachot in this context, and the simcha we talk about with a wedding or a bris or engagement, are two sides of the same coin of life. Because we mourn, we also know how to rejoice. And we see the importance of going all in for a wedding. And still deeper, life cycle events like births and pidyon bens and weddings, life cycle events like death and shiva and shloshim and kaddish, yortzeit. These all come from the same source, from our being created as mortals with a life cycle. As we said, sometimes it's this kind of life cycle event, sometimes it's the other kind of life cycle event. Sometimes, in fact, they happen in the same year or on the same day. For those of us still alive, we're advised to recognize that it all comes from the same source. This coming Monday, is Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat. It's called the Jewish Arbor Day, or the New Year for trees. Not that they have to hear the shofar or send out Rosh Hashanah cards. Rather, it's how the Mishnah decides which trees are for which year with respect to agricultural laws. But it's a wonderful minhag to eat tree fruits on Tu B'Shvat, make a bracha, Borei Pri Ha'etz, thanking God for creating the fruit of the trees. Some year at Shul, we've made a Tu B'Shvat Seder with different kinds of fruit and wine. However, in Shulchan Aruch, the halacha is no more and no less than simply omitting Tachanun on that day, on Tu B'Shvat, on Monday. We just omit a few pages of extra prayers that are said not even every day. From here, you can make a major point out of the unity of the Jewish people. It sounds in jest, but think about it. The proper, correct halachic observance of Tu B'Shvat is to leave out several pages of supplicatory prayers from our Siddur, which we anyway don't say on Shabbos or holidays or wherever there's a simcha. Either we have a bris in shul, or there's a chasan, a bridegroom in the minyan on the day of his chuppah, or a chasan in the first 7 days of rejoicing after the wedding, or in a home where people are sitting shiva. We also don't say tachanun there, because, as we said, there's smachot and there's smachot. If it's ironic or flippant to say that this holiday unites all the Jewish people in observing its halachas fully, it's also the truth. Most Jews don't daven every day formally, so anyway, they don't say tachanun on Monday or any other day. And those who do, you always find differences of observance among observant Jews. In Israel, people keep 1 day of a holiday. In Toronto, 2 days. But everyone agrees to leave out Tachanun on Tu B'Shvat. So that's this Monday. This Shabbat, we read about Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds. There was a speaker this week in Toronto on leadership, and a bunch of friends were going, so I went. Truth is, the friends were a bigger draw than the speaker, but it turned out the speaker had a lot of good things to say. He told the story of a school principal who had had it up to here with the frustrations of running a Jewish day school, felt he wasn't getting enough support, he was underpaid, he was ready to throw in the towel. So he went to the superintendent to explain his decision before he informed the school staff that he was resigning. The superintendent listened to him and his problems, and after a reflective moment, he said, "It's a mazel that you weren't at Kriyas Yamsuf. It's a good thing that you weren't there at the splitting of the Red Sea. We wouldn't have made it through." You have so many excuses, you have so many reasons, so many complaints, so many ways that the job can't be done. At the dramatic moment in this week's Parsha, where the Jewish people are between a rock and a hard place, between the sea in front of us and the advancing Egyptian army behind us, we did what Jews usually do under dire circumstances. We formed committees, we held meetings. The speaker had a lot to say about meetings too, none of it very complimentary. He said the only decision you can count on that will result from a meeting is the resolution that we need another meeting. Okay, but at Yam Suf, at the sea, Moses' words, Moshe Rabbeinu's words, suggest that there were no fewer than 4 separate strategic planning committees that formed to address that moment of crisis. There was a committee that said, now's the time to fight. We have to fight against those Egyptians. Who knows what the outcome will be, but we're not going like sheep to the slaughter. We're taking up arms. That was one thought. Another committee felt it's better to be alive at any price, even if it meant surrendering this newly found freedom. Let's go back to Egypt. We'll resume the slave life. At least we'll have 3 squares a day and a roof over our heads. A third group said, no, it's not worth paying any price. Let's die here. We'll do the Masada thing. We'll end our lives, and we'll send a powerful message that Jews cannot be subjugated. It'll cost us our lives and the future of our people, but we'll make a strong statement. Another group, obviously the frum ones, said, let's daven, let's pray. We have nowhere to turn other than God, and that's what we should be doing at this very moment. All this is implicit in 2 verses in the second aliyah of our parsha. Verse 13 says, Vayomer Moshe ala'am hisyatzevu u're'u es Yeshuas Hashem. Don't be afraid. Stand still, and you will see the salvation of God, asher yaseh lechem hayom, that He's going to do for you today. That's the answer for those who wanted to give up and end the whole thing. Wait till you see what comes next. Moshe told them, God will deliver us from this. Don't touch that dial. The verse continues, Ki asher re'isem Mitzrayim hayom, those Egyptians you see today, lo sasifu liros oisam ad olam. You'll never see them again. This was Moshe's answer to the group that wanted to go back and be slaves again. Go back and be slaves? To whom? Wait 5 minutes. The Egyptians will drown in the sea. You won't see them no more. Next verse is 2 more answers. Hashem yelachem lachem. God will fight the battle for you in response to those who wanted to fight. Rashi says, lachem means on your behalf. You won't have to lift a finger. And finally, va'atem tacharishun, you should remain silent. Even prayer was not what was called for at the moment. In the end, what happened? We made it. So which of those committees' proposals carried the day? Which got the majority vote? Which one? If you were there, how would you vote? Give yourself a moment to think. Okay, the answer is none of those won. Moshe turned to God, who said, Ma titzak elai, daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yisau. What are you complaining to me for? What are you crying out to me for, says God. Tell the Jewish people, keep moving forward. There's actually 4 words in this Rashi that are easy to miss. The speaker highlighted them. She'ein hayam omed b'fneihem. The sea was actually not before them. The sea wasn't the obstacle, as is proven from what happened next. The Jews thinking the sea was a barrier, an obstacle. That's what the obstacle was. They thought, oh my gosh, there's an ocean in front of us. No can do. Logically speaking, according to the strategic planners, according to nature, we can't go there. But that was, in fact, the way to go. Nachshon ben Aminadav proved it by jumping in. When the waters were up to his nose, that's when the sea split and the Jewish people walked through dry shod. That sea, which a few minutes before looked like an obstacle to us getting where we needed to go, instead became the channel, the very path itself by which we would go. What's more, when the Egyptians followed, the sea, which before was an obstacle, then became a pathway, now became our ally in vanquishing our adversaries. How quickly things can turn around when we just change our perspective a little bit. In all of this, we cannot overlook, we cannot fail to mention the verse in our Sedra, which says that Moshe carried the bones of Joseph. This connects the story of the last hostage with the journey out of Egypt. The third verse in Parsha Beshalach reads, Moshe took the bones of Yosef with him, for he had firmly adjured the children of Israel. He made them take an oath, saying, God will surely remember you, and you shall bring up my bones from here with you. So important was it for Yosef to be buried at home in Israel, where he was born but did not live the rest of his life, that he made his brothers swear that when their descendants would take him home with them when they left, bury him in Israel. And you can visit his grave today in Shechem. In the same week when we read that section, we learned of the discovery of Ran Gvili's remains in Gaza, and he too was brought home by his brothers and buried in his hometown of Meitar. We see from all this that the journey home is not a short one, it's not an easy one. We see also that we have much to be thankful for. So on this Shabbat Shira, this Shabbos of the Song of Thanksgiving, our Song of Thanksgiving continues to be appropriate, very much called for, and heartfelt. Shabbat Shalom.